Well, BP is under pressure to raise cash to pay for that cleanup. Joining us now to discuss BP's potential sales of assets is Sarah Hunt. She is a research analyst who is focused on the energy industry at Alpine Mutual Funds. Sarah, so glad to have you with us in the newsroom.
Morning.
What about this idea that BP has tons of cash and they didn't need to sell any assets at all? Should we be a little bit more concerned about the company now that we've heard, for example, potential interest from Apache on some of BP's Alaska properties?
Well, I think that in the beginning, we didn't know how much oil was coming out. We didn't know when it was going to get capped. So I think that there were a lot of numbers thrown around. The longer it takes to cap it, the more expensive it's obviously going to be and the more collateral damage there is. I think that between the trust fund that BP agreed to set up and the fact that this has taken so long to ameliorate, I mean, we don't even know if it's going to be capped soon, that it's better for them to go ahead and start raising some money. And it's clear that there are assets that they could sell if they wanted to. And I think instead of waiting until it really becomes an issue, it's easier to start talking about it now.
What do you make of Tony Hayward, the CEO, sort of popping around on this kind of world tour? I mean, it seems as if he was shopping some of BP's assets to sovereign wealth funds last week.
Well, I think that if you decide that you should possibly be thinking about raising money, there's no reason not to go to the places where money is. And I think that that's one of the ways that they were looking at it, in the same way that the U.S. banking industry raised a lot of cash that way when they were having problems.
Sarah, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that BP, first of all, sells anything?
I think it's pretty likely. I mean, they certainly have a lot of assets. In any portfolio, you're going to have assets that either aren't your favorites or that you know you could sell at any time because they're really good assets. So I think it's pretty likely that they sell a couple of things and start building some cash.
And now how likely is it that we see BP as a company taken over? I mean, we've heard rumors of ExxonMobil or potentially Shell. Basically, those are the only two companies big enough to do it. Is that a low likelihood?
Well, I think that until you have a handle on the liabilities, to me, it's a low likelihood, because until you know what those liabilities are, if I'm Exxon or if I'm Shell shareholders, I don't want them buying an unlimited liability. So unless there's some sort of deal wherein you have some kind of cap or something on the liabilities, I think it's a challenge to buy the whole thing at the moment.
We sort of touched on this idea of BP potentially selling one of its Alaskan properties to Apache. Do you think that's a good fit from Apache's point of view?
Well, Apache does an outstanding job of taking properties that have already been producing for a longer period of time and getting a lot more out of them than anybody thought they would. They bought some properties from BP a few years ago in the North Sea, the Forties Field, and they did an outstanding job with that. So I think it's a good fit for Apache. I mean, I've seen a lot of things about, well, you know, they're not so good they don't know enough about northern assets. I think Apache's a fantastic operator, and they will do a very good job buying assets if they decide to buy them.
And Sarah, bigger picture here, I mean, we have heard other oil execs criticize BP for its poor track record as far as safety goes. What do you think about the BP brand, the BP franchise? Is it so hurt that it will not be able to move forward in whatever form it's going to be in?
Well, there have been a lot of sort of corporate transformations or corporate, rebirths, or however you want to determine that. I think right now they obviously are under a huge amount of criticism, and it's going to take a long time to get out of that problem that they've created for themselves.
Sarah, thank you so much for the time. Sarah Hunt, Alpine Mutual Funds, joining us there on the very latest with BP, saying it's very likely that BP does sell off some assets.